Theme park workers. What unknown privileges do insanely wealthy people receive at your park? Story 1. I worked at Walt Disney World. Kids between 1-year-old and 16 years old with wealthy parents would sometimes rent out entire theme parks. One time, Hollywood Studios was rented out to a kid who was, I believe, turning 8. Most of the rides stayed open and multiple bars serving booze would set up for the grown-ups. Full-service bars are scattered throughout the park. We keep the park open a few hours after closing for them to ride the rides privately and get wasted. I had no idea how much it'd cost to do something like that, but it happened quite often. Sometimes the families were the coolest and would have fun. Other times they'd be snobs and act younger than the kid having the birthday. For the families who were fun, the employees were usually a lot more relaxed, due to no crowds, and would have fun with them too. In some cases, the group would be on one side of the park and we'd be sending empty ride vehicles around just waiting for them to show up. We knew it'd be about an hour before they'd reach us, so we'd trade rides. So while we operated our ride, operators of another attraction would come. Maybe the lights get turned on for things like the rock and roller coaster. Maybe all the lights get turned off and we'd ride it in pitch black. It was a lot of fun to do that. Open bars and unlimited rides, even for the staff? Can someone tell me how I can apply to work at those theme parks? Story 2. I worked at WDW, first in resorts and then in parks. The only major difference I witnessed at the resort was when we set up a late check-in, 11 p.m., and cleared the lobby for it. It wasn't even that big of a deal because there were only a couple of people hanging around that late, and the store was closing down for the night anyway. In the parks, it differs by who the VIP is and what they decide. Some just go to the park like anyone else, cause a little bit of a stir when recognized, but otherwise just spend their day like everyone else. Some do the keys to the Kingdom tour, like someone else already mentioned, but it's pretty standard and pretty much anyone can do it if they want to pay for it. And then there are the guided tours, where you have someone from guest service with you all day, and you line jump and get priority seating, etc. But again, pretty much anyone can do it if they can pay for it. Disney will typically bend over backwards to support any reasonable requests. I know they've cleared restaurants at celebrity requests before, but all in all, during my time here, it was a pretty low-key. Story 3. I worked at Disney World. Celebrities get guided access to and through the Utilidor tunnel system beneath Magic Kingdom if they wanted to get to different parts of the park the fastest. They mainly only go to the nicer parts though, like the clean and pristine sections under Fantasyland and Main Street, not the gross ones where most of us worked. Johnny Depp ends up in the nasty parts of Adventureland to gain access to the elevators that get you up to Pirates. Fun-ish story, sort of relevant. Mariah Carey was a person we were all told to avoid at all costs, for our own sake, at least in my land. We were told that if we saw an entourage coming that even kind of looked like she'd be in it, to just turn or duck away, because she was such a misery. I never ran into her while she visited with her husband and kids, but I found it interesting that her behavior was so egregious that our leaders went out of their way to warn us about her. Story 4. I worked at Busch Gardner's back in the 90s. During that time, we had celebrities like Garth Brooks, WWE wrestlers and their families, and Hanson. Shut up. It was the 90s. Visit while I worked there. I found the treatment depended on the celebrity in question. Garth Brooks and his band, along with their families, were all pretty low-key, though they were escorted through the park by an employee and allowed to travel from point to point using employee walkways. They didn't really ask for much. They rode rides and they were all very friendly. The WWE guys were the most low-key and the most fun. They didn't ask for escorts. They roamed around on their own and just had a blast. They were fun to interact with. I wasn't a wrestling fan, so I didn't know any of them by name, but they were huge guys and all stood out in the crowd. They were hard to miss. As for Hanson, well, most of us never even saw them. From what I understand, if they wanted to ride something, the ride was cleared of other guests while they rode. They were taken around, behind the scenes everywhere they went, and we were told to try not to interact with them unless they started a conversation. I should point out that I only bring up celebrities because non-famous rich people don't stand out. All the regular wealthy just blend in. Well, at Busch Gardens, I did see Governor Rick Scott once. I was there just as a guest at that time. For good reason, he doesn't travel light. Story 5. I work at Universal Orlando and have been for a few years now. We have two different types of VIP tours. Ones that are non-private, you share the tour with another group or two, that start at around $300 minus park admission. And then private tours, just your party, that start at around $2,500. The latter group is usually celebrities or families that don't want to deal with crowds or wait in line. They get taken through VIP staircases if they're celebrities. They'll travel backstage to avoid crowds. They won't use public restrooms, but rather our employee restrooms. They get special meals, free photos, and a ton of other stuff. They're generally some of the most pleasant people I deal with throughout the day. Can't say anything for the celebrities because I don't talk to them. Most are excited to be on the tour and love skipping the lines and the private tour they get all day. If a company wants to rent out the park, they can, with a fee. We've had some major companies rent it out for a night, Microsoft last month, and they get all the rides, merchandise, catering, and open bars all to themselves. Money talks, friends. Money talks indeed. Story 6. I worked at Canada's Wonderland for a few years, but it seemed like every time a celebrity came, I happened to just miss them. Wonderland does offer some VIP things though, which I know most celebrities use. I only saw Adam Sandler using this himself. Basically, you just get escorted to the rides by someone and get instant access to them. Justin Bieber, though, is another story. Unfortunately, I hardly remember details about this, nor do I know how true they are. But I remember some of my friends telling me he spent like 5 to 10K for him and a bunch of his friends to only go on 2 rides. I'm assuming they rented it out for a small amount of time. One of which, go-karting, he demanded to wear gloves for. Someone said he didn't want to touch the steering wheel because he was too good to touch it with his hands. Anyway, I doubt that part is true, but at the same time, it's Bieber, so who knows. Aside from that, I don't remember much else. Justin Trudeau is apparently always nice and calls people by their name on their name tag. I still regret calling in the day he came to Wonderland. Story 7. This story is about wealthy people at theme parks and their privileges, but it is not linked as the question wants it to be. Not me, but one of my old bosses now works at an indoor theme park in Dubai, as head of the rides or something like that. I don't know what it's called, sorry. I heard from his fiancée, who is my current boss, that one day the royal family of Dubai came to the theme park. They chose a ride to go on and got free access to go on it. They went around one time and they wanted to go around again, but the employee managing the ride didn't let them because there was a line of people already waiting to go on. Now, for some context, if the royal family of Dubai wants to do something, you let them. The family said to the owners of the park and the guy, I know that the employee managing the ride was not allowed to work there anymore, and that he had to go home to the UK and never come back. That man is now never allowed to go to Dubai again. Story 8. I work at Universal Orlando, and One Direction once bought out the park at night after one of the concerts they had. They stayed really late and spent most of their time in the newly opened, at the time, Diagon Alley. They didn't even come to my section of the park, but I got paid, so there's that. A lot of celebrities that come around will either just walk through normally and we're required to act like we don't know who they are, or some will buy the super VIP that lets them basically do and go wherever they like. That last option also gives you a personal tour guide. It's like $3,000 for a person or some ridiculous number like that. It's interesting how different celebrities choose to enjoy the park. Some incognito, some with all-access VIP. Story 9. Walt Disney World worker here too. Magic Kingdom, Big Thunder Mountain at the time. You could always figure out the level of celebrity by their entrance to the ride, like if they just used unlimited fast passes, came through the wheelchair-accessible line, or very rarely if they closed down one side. When Jimmy Carter came through with his family, we shut down one half so they could ride on the train alone. A kid in line saw that the train was basically empty and was clearly upset as his mom said, "That's Jimmy Carter." The kid yelled, "Who the hell is Jimmy Carter?" Jimmy Carter saluted the kid, and we dispatched the train so damn fast. Side story, I was told that when Prince came through the park, he never left the tunnels. Story 10. A big UK theme park based on bricks. Most celebs get the usual best line skipping products, free stuff, and backstage tours. However, we also had someone visit who was royalty from a very oil-rich country, so it was a more money, no object type deal. The team I worked with had to run around with radios ahead of his family and a 20-strong entourage, trying not to be seen to predict his movements. When they arrived at the ride, we clear out the next line of plebeians and let them all waltz in and go straight on. Rumors were that this service was a 5-figure sum. They didn't want to speak to or even be near staff, so everything went through their minders. That's all the antics I was involved in, but I'm sure there were more, as they all stayed in the hotel on site. Story 11. I worked at Sesame Place in a suburb outside of Philadelphia, specifically in the rides department. Every theme park has those cut the line passes. It may cost like $29 for unlimited uses. When you buy that pass, they explicitly say you may have to wait 1 or 2 ride cycles. Oh, these parents couldn't care less about those rules. Since I'm one of the supervisors, I get to deal with all of those complaints. The 3 best entitlement stories are about someone trying to use it after we closed all of the rides. She made her child cry to try and get on. That was a fun one to say no to. Another was a dad who let a child spit on my shoe, saying they had to wait for a ride since that one was full. The final one was a parent who hopped the fence while the ride was running because he didn't want to wait, and one of the cars was open on this ride. Not to mention the countless dads who have threatened to punch me in the face for making them follow the rules. Money can buy you a lot, but it won't get you a good character. If you're vibing with that, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories of privileges gone wrong. Story 12. I worked at Six Flags. As most people know, theme parks have different tiers of tickets you can buy that entitle customers, or guests as we call them, to certain privileges, i.e. the base ticket for entry is $45. The early admissions/base season pass is $60. What a lot of people don't know is that we had a tier of ticket that started at $500 that gives you 1. A corporate escort that will allow you to cut in any line at the park, 2. Unlimited food and drink, 3. Unlimited re-rides without needing to exit for another guest first, 4. A private air-conditioned lounge area where you can rest. Story 13. I worked at Legoland Windsor for 4 years. During that period, multiple celebrities came through, and all received different treatment, and 3 people in particular stood out. Katie Price, a truly awful woman, would regularly come to the park and demand all the diva treatments, passes, and VIP parking routes in and out of the park to avoid regular people. She pays for nothing, gets everything, and thanks no one. Michael McLintyre also received most of the above. As to whether or not any payments were received for those services, I do not know. But in general, he was reportedly much more pleasant and fun to deal with and less demanding. Finally, Boris Becker showed up one day at the front entrance at about 2 p.m. Well, after the morning rush, and as most other people in the park were eating lunch, he produced 3 annual passes for him and the kids, handed them to me so I could check they were his. We had a pleasant, if brief, conversation as I scanned them through, and he went on about his day like a normal person. Guess who my favorite celebrity guest was while I worked there? Story 14. At Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio, you can purchase a gold VIP package, which gets you an instant boarding up the next exit on any and every ride you wish to ride. No waiting at all. Whichever seat you specifically want for about 8 hours of the day. The 8 that matter. I believe it's 12 to 8. There's also a food package that comes with it, but I worked at rides, so I don't know much about that. Honestly, it's more of a hassle than anything because we have to tell guests that they paid $600 per person to ride any ride at the time they wanted it. And sorry, you have to wait because they have money. It sucks, but hey, when you get the dough. Story 15. I worked at Universal Studios Orlando for a while, running The Revenge of the Mummy. It was a ton of fun. Amazingly, we managed to fit Shaq on our ride vehicles. They had stadium-style seating, so the last row was higher up and had more legroom. I'd always get funny looks from larger people when I told them to ride in the last row. Some thought it was a racial thing, but when I told them Shaquille O'Neal could fit in the last row, they'd shut right up. To everyone wondering how Shaq fits and doesn't get what I mean, by stadium-style seating, the floor of the ride vehicle is at the same level, but the seats in the rear are higher up, so everyone has a good view of the ride and show. So in the back row, you have quite a bit more legroom than in the first row. Even larger people, not Shaq-style large, had an easier time fitting in the last row. Shaquille O'Neal riding in the last row of the Revenge of the Mummy ride. Now that's some VIP legroom. Story 16. Hello, I work for Universal Orlando VIP Sales. We sell to international royalty, celebrities, and generally wealthy individuals. One of the most unknown privileges is the immense security detail team on standby, ready to escort VVIP guests throughout the parks. Many times, the tours we book include both the guests and their personal security as part of the tour group, but our own dedicated security team likewise follows the party around unnoticed by both party and regular guests to make sure they're not approached anytime they're in a guest-facing on-stage area. These guests in the VIP tours are taken through backstages almost exclusively, brought in through VIP entrances built into newer attractions or up through the exit turnstiles or team member backstage entrances to get to the front of the line at every single attraction. If you've ever experienced a brief delay in operation while queuing for an attraction, chances are it's paused to allow a VIP tour to skip the line, or someone dumped cremated ashes into the dead person's favorite ride. That happens more often than you might imagine. Story 17. I worked at Walt Disney World, SeaWorld, and Universal Orlando. With all of them, you can hire a private VIP tour guide to take you around the park. At this level, you don't use the normal entry. There are VIP entries, so you don't have to deal with security and lines. Speaking of lines, that isn't a thing anymore. You can go directly to the loading area for rides. Universal had some secret waiting rooms that VIPs could wait in so they could jump right into the pre-show. Some rides have that. And then directly onto the ride. They also don't just walk from place to place like you do. They will walk off one place and appear in another area of the park. It's kind of hard to visualize, but a lot of rides are closer to each other than you realize. For example, in Hollywood Studios, the Disney Junior show is practically next to Rock and Roller Coaster through backstage areas. Meanwhile, Animal Kingdom and Epcot have an outer street backstreet that circles the whole park, which means VIPs get driven around backstage instead of walking half a mile. At SeaWorld, there are a bunch of semi-off-limit backstage areas that only certain tours will see, but you can bet the VIPs get to go to the top of the shark exhibit and look down. For normal people, you are in a tube with the shark swimming above and around you. There is also VIP seating for shows at all parks, so they don't need to show up 30 minutes before the show to have a seat. They can stroll in 5 minutes before the show starts. Also, if you are a super VIP at Disney, aka Tom Cruise or Neil Patrick Harris, you might get to sleep at the Cinderella Castle suite. Everyone else gets picked up by a private van from their hotel, so that they don't have to wait for buses or trek through endless parking lots. Story 18. I work on a roller coaster at Walt Disney World. Our ride has a separate wheelchair entrance that's near one of our exits, and sometimes they will come up through there with a personal tour guide and we'll put them on there. For bigger celebrities, we bring them in through the back door. Basically, an area of the ride guests don't normally access will be put on the ride. We did this for Snoop Dogg one day. And if they want to go back out the same way, they ride twice because the ride has 2 separate stations and only one of them has the backdoor entrance, and the trains flip from one station to another. The most insane version of this I saw was when Joe Biden came to our ride. We cycled out the ride, closed the queue, and ran trains until the entire building was empty except for the cast members, and then put Joe on the ride. There were Secret Service agents everywhere, and we had to tell them exactly how to evacuate the ride in case it shut down, where we would take them, and everything. They also had a security helicopter hovering about 250 feet above the ride, and it was windy and loud as hell. That was an interesting experience. Snoop Dogg doubling down on the coaster ride and Joe Biden's Secret Service operation at the theme park. Roller coasters with a twist. Story 19. I worked in Cedar Point in the 90s for 2 summers. First of all, I have no idea why it would be a celeb thing to go behind the scenes. That stuff is built for employees and is not at all interesting or even nice. I guess I see it as moving celebrities around to avoid crowds, but there is no other benefit. So, pay attention! If you want celebrity-like access, what is most important at a theme park? The rides. Members of ACE, American Coaster Enthusiasts, do not wait in line for rides. Have you stood in line for 3 to 4 hours to get an awesome coaster? Well, ACE members jump the line. I think they don't go to parks as individuals and get this privilege. Instead, they arrange to show up at the park as a group. Cedar Point would open a coaster an hour early and let the group in the park ride the ride again and again, and they would spend the day jumping lines. ACE members vote on coasters, rides, and many other things about theme parks. Best soft pretzels, cleanest rooms, etc. So theme parks want to make those people as happy as possible. Join ACE if you love theme parks and want immediate access to rides. Story 20. I live near Drayton Manor Park in the Midlands, UK. It's a lovely family-run theme park, which, as well as the usual roller coasters and other theme park rides, has the amazing Thomas Land. Thomas Land is an area of the park that is Thomas the Tank Engine themed. It's cute, really well done, and they have people dressed as the Fat Controller and other engineers. About 10 or so years ago, David Beckham paid for the park to be open only to him and his entourage for the day. I think it was off-peak, so it wasn't too much of a big deal for anyone who would want to visit. He rented it out for his son's birthday, as his son was really into Thomas the Tank Engine. So he had his son and his friends there, and apparently he brought in a group of less fortunate kids and paid for their food and anything else they wanted or needed, so they could have a nice day out as well as his kid and friends. He apparently is a really nice, humble guy, and not up his own behind like a lot of celebs. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy witnessing private school rich kid meltdowns. Story 4 will leave you speechless. See you on that video.